you mentioned investment and with respect to investor confidence. So one of the things that everyone has said, and it's pretty obvious to everyone in this room, is that we need to attract investment. Right? So I want to go to you, Bambo, and feel free to start, with remark and to what has been said. But I would like you to kind of segue us into what do we need to do to get this finance interests into the country?
It's a great question. I had prepared a whole lot to say about the energy mix, but I think Rosaria and Michelle have covered that entire slate. But I would like to speak a little bit about our own perspective at Oando as an indigenous company. For us, we have to be optimistic. We remain optimistic. We look at all these challenges more as opportunities. And taking advantage of those opportunities is really the value that indigenous companies can bring in terms of innovation. I'll give examples of how we're looking at it. Yesterday, the Secretary General of OPEC said in his keynote that Nigeria will have almost 400 million people, projected to have almost 400 million people by 2050, which would make us the third most populous country on the planet. But every time I hear this stat quoted, it's almost quoted as a negative thing. But in truth, that would mean that the demand is there. We keep talking about how do you generate the demand. These 400 million people will need power. Nigerians, by definition, are also very resilient and resourceful. These people will be industrious. So how do we create between now and that time? Because we're not going to wake up one day and we're 350, 400 million people. It's going to grow over time. So how do we create the infrastructure, the enabling environment for these people to generate value? And like you said, I can try and segue that into attracting finance. Traditional finance or financing of projects really hasn't worked as well as it would in other climes in Nigeria. We have to be a bit more creative in what we do. Rather than having the finance be the foundation to drive the demand, I think we need to let the demand drive the finance. And what am I trying to say? I'll give an example. If, for example, we have declared the decade of gas in terms of going with the energy mix. The energy mix by itself is something that I believe will happen organically. The idea of net zero by the timelines that have been dictated will not work for everyone. We do have unique opportunities. We have almost 40% of the reserves on the continent, but very minimal investment. It's not proportional to the kind of reserves that we have. Our reserves to production is low. However, we know every drop of oil or molecule of gas that we produce today has a home, except for the ones that we flare, which is something that both the IOCs, the indigenous companies have taken up to the point that we've had a serious reduction even in our flares. I had wished that the Honorable Minister of Communication would be here, because there are really some synergies there that we have to look at when I say we can't look at traditional financing. For example, we look at a company like, talking about global companies now, like NVIDIA. It's been in the news a lot lately. NVIDIA has recently become a $3 trillion market cap company. 10 years ago, they were about $10 billion, which is still a lot in our environment. But the growth has been driven by AI technology effectively. What do they manufacture specifically is AI chips that go into data centers for cloud computing. What is cloud computing? There are data centers all over the world, many of them in the middle of nowhere. All you require is connectivity. In Nigeria, we're really a gas country. We have a lot of gas. We have flares, even though some of them are very small. There's absolutely nothing wrong in exploring building data centers that are minimally manned in the Niger Delta where the flares are, and then connecting them to the internet. The internet is global. Your demand for that infrastructure would be global. So we talk, and we can do this very quickly, it would be transformational. So we talk a lot about creating the demand. We need to start looking at, first of all, global demand. How can we serve that? We're going to have almost 400 million people. If they are well grounded, educated, they will create the value given the right infrastructure. And for financing, we need to start looking at the demand itself, pulling for the financing. There's many structures you can use. You can use vendor financing. There have been instances where we've spoken to like LNG developers to even go down the value chain and fund the drilling of the wells for the gas that will supply the LNG plants. And then the gas pays for the well that was drilled. And at the same time, you'll have what we're now calling associated oil, which would be an upside. Michelle said earlier that it has to be a portfolio, it has to be profitable. It's what I heard from it, because we look for opportunities. And when you say something has to be profitable, it's going to be organically driven. I have a little bit more to say, but maybe I'll keep it. But I was talking about the energy mix, and I think I missed this out. We're in a unique position. If we look at the way, and this example keeps coming up, that telecoms developed in Nigeria, we had Nitel, we had landlines. It was in a lot of places, it wasn't everywhere. When we had mobile phones, we didn't go and complete deploying landlines over Nigeria before we all switched. The objective was to have the communication, which we all have now. So now we have gas power plants, we have gas lines, and we continue to build them. However, once we can really invest and ramp up our rural electrification, mini grids, things like that, we will organically get into an energy mix that works for us and will balance out for us, given that we can't leave our valuable resources in the ground.